We must continue to adjust to climate change. We are receiving today having Ronald Stein. Ronald is engineer, senior policy advisor, and he's co-author of the Pulitzer Prize nominated book Clean Energy Exploitation. So later he can show the cover of the book. Paul Dreesen, very pleasure to have you here, Paul, today. Paul is a senior policy analyst for the Committee for CFAC, author of articles and books on environmental, climate, and human rights issues. And this is me only to show that I'm here too. That's great. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to run the people. Starting with Paul, please. Paul, is it the first time the world is facing climate change? Is something new for the world?
Oh, absolutely. It never happened before in Earth history. But that is one of the craziest notions. I mean, we've had climate change throughout Earth and human history. I grew up in Wisconsin in the United States. We had 5 separate glaciers come right down on top of Wisconsin. Each one of them was 1 mile to 2 miles thick. That is real climate change. And talk about oceans rising. Each time those glaciers came, and I'm going to talk about the last one because I have an interesting little rock here from that last glacial period. That so much water was taken out of the oceans to form those glaciers, massive amounts of snow and ice, that the oceans were 400 feet lower than they are today. And then 12,000 years ago, for some reason we still don't understand, the glaciers melted again and the oceans started to rise, and up they came little by little, 400 feet to where they are today. So that is really significant climate change. And that was very dangerous, catastrophic climate change. Just imagine half of North America, half of Europe, half of Asia, parts of South America buried under 1 mile of ice or 2 miles of ice. No growing season to speak of. You couldn't grow crops. The land that is now being grown, it was under ice. It was too cold. It had too little carbon dioxide to support plants. That is really significant climate change. And I'm going to show you this rock because it comes from a place just a few miles from where I actually grew up in Wisconsin. And it's hard to see right here, but these are scratches made by rocks and stones that were pushed along underneath the glacier, right along the path of that glacier for who knows how many miles. But this is right where I grew up, and I was digging around in a limestone quarry. I found this at the point where the grass now grows. This is the highest point of the limestone in that part of Wisconsin. It's the same limestone that used to be a coral reef, another period of great climate change. So before the glaciers, it was a limestone coral reef that began at Niagara Falls in New York, went all the way across North America to Wisconsin, and then went all the way south to Indiana University, where that same rock was turned into buildings for the university.
Before I ask you, Paul, about the reasons that the globe has this type of, let's see, phenomenon, I would like to ask Ronald, why press, politicians do not speak about this reality, Ronald?
They, again, it gets back to the word energy. I mean, everybody is just misusing the word energy. They think that fossil fuels has created the climate change problem, and that wind and solar energy is going to replace fossil fuels. As Paul pointed out, they're wrong on one case. Fossil fuels didn't cause this, but the word energy is just a misused word because they want to get rid of fossil fuels because that's been the cause of climate change and replace it with wind and solar. But as we talked about, wind and solar only generates electricity. it makes no products for society. And today we're a very materialistic society that didn't exist 200 years ago. And, you know, everything we have today, all the products, it came from oil, not directly from oil. Oil by itself is useless. It's black tar. And unless you're going to refine it into oil derivatives, and through human ingenuity, we've been able to make, you know, more than like 6,000 products, make our lives more comfortable. We got air conditioning, we got heating, we got, you know, hospitals, we got airports that didn't exist 200 years ago. I mean, all the things that make our life much, much more comfortable is as a result of all those oil derivatives that are making those products. And society wants to eliminate oil, reverse climate change, and we're going to have clean energy. We're not going to have clean energy. It might be clean electricity, if you want to call it clean, but that's a mining issue. We'll talk about a different subject. But electricity makes nothing. It doesn't make any tires. It can't make iPhones and defibrillators. And it's going to be a totally different world. And the problem, the reason Paul and I wrote this article is that, you know, there's 8 billion people in this earth. And more than 60% of them are living on less than $10 a day. They're just trying to survive. And if we get rid of oil, you know, it's not oil that's going to do them in, it's the lack of the products. We have no backup plan. I'm 100% in favor of getting rid of oil if there's a backup plan.
Yeah,
Because we have a materialistic society. You know, we want our iPhones and our iPads and our washing machines and clean water and sanitation. And right now, we've got no way to reproduce that without those oil derivatives. So that's the confusion is the word energy. It's either
Can I
products. Go for it.
Can I add 2 points to that? Number one, climate change is the false claim behind all this drive to transform our energy systems to get rid of fossil fuels. They're using climate change as the excuse, the justification for doing that. Number two, as Ron is so importantly pointing out, it's not just the electricity, which would skyrocket in price and be dramatically lower in availability and reliability if we go to wind and solar, but you can't even make wind turbines, solar panels, batteries, or any of this, or the transmission lines without oil, because that's the source of plastics, paints, pharmaceuticals, thousands of products that Ron has written about. They all come from oil, and without oil and natural gas, you don't have those. You don't have fertilizers for crops. You don't have fuel for tractors. You don't have the clothing you're wearing. Countless things come from that oil and gas, and it's affordable. People that don't have that access to oil and gas-based products and energy, they're paying 30, 40 cents a kilowatt hour compared to 15 cents that we're paying in the United States on average,
much higher price.
compared to 6 cents or 7 cents in China. You can't stay in business at 40 cents, 45 cents a kilowatt hour. You can't heat your home.
Yeah. Let me show. Good night, good evening. Jorge Oliveira from Lisbon. It's a pleasure to have you here. Paul, you as a geologist, based knowledge, do we know what's the reason the planet presents this climate impact every cycle? Do we know the logic of these things?
We've got some understanding of it. The climate lunatics, crazies, fanatics, ideologues, the people focused on climate say it's all due to carbon dioxide from greenhouse gases, or to other greenhouse gases from fossil fuel use. But the scientists who actually study this, the primary driver of climate change and weather changes and so forth, all these weather patterns and so on, is the sun. The sun is not constant in its type of energy or the amount of energy or the other radiation that comes out of the sun. And where we are in the solar system changes, the shape of the elliptical orbit, where the Earth is on that orbit, and where the solar system is, changes. It's not constant. So you add up all those things, the tilt of the Earth, that also is not constant. But what exactly caused 5 glacial periods to come and go? Mile high glacier, then no glacier. Mile high glacier, another no glacier. Why did that happen? We really don't know. And if we can't explain that, we certainly can't explain the notion of modern climate change, part of which may be due to humans and fossil fuels, but most of it is not. And they can't even separate the human part of that from the natural part.
Perfect. So, Ronald, as we cannot do anything because it's an unpredictable events that we have forward, what do humans can do facing this climate change?
Work on conservation and efficiencies. We're extracting a lot of resources from the earth: oil, coal, natural gas, cobalt, lithium. All these things we're taking out of the earth. And humans have been around, I say modern humanity has only been around really a couple hundred years. Humans have been around, I guess a couple 100,000 years, but when humans started extracting from the earth all these resources, they're going to last so long, maybe 100 years, 500 years, maybe 1,000 years, but the earth's been around for 4 billion years. You can't keep taking out of the bank. The bank's going to run dry eventually. But our politicians are under so much pressure to do something that, disregarding all the logic that Paul mentioned about climate change, the politicians, the only thing they see is emissions. Well, that must be the cause of climate change. So we're going to get rid of emissions. And that's really getting us to the point we're at right now and they have no backup plan. We got 4 billion people on this earth. 8 billion people on this earth. And it'd be nice to maintain that people and improve their lives. With all the money we're mandating and subsidizing, we could devote some of that to the 6 billion people who are living on nothing and improve the quality of their lives. Instead, we're basically focusing on, so only the wealthy countries are doing this because they got the money to subsidize, they got the money to print. And it's making very expensive for the people living in those wealthy countries, and the people in poor countries, they're just getting further and further out of reach from ever joining the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and added to that, and those are excellent points, Ron. The fact is, we adjust to climate change every year. In the summer, we wear different clothes than we do in the wintertime. And if we move to a different part of the world, we adjust to the climate where we move to. People have done that forever. You mentioned conservation. One of the conservation things is water. How do you make water go further? You take a look at what's going on in Israel, where they have created amazing things. First of all, they're a desert. They get far less water rainfall in Israel than they do in Arizona, the driest state in the United States. And yet they have adapted to that. They have desalination to turn ocean water, salt water, into fresh water that you can drink. Then they recycle almost all of that water and use the water that we've used in our homes and kitchens and our bathrooms and use it to water plants in agriculture. And they've also come up with systems they call drip irrigation, where you run little hoses around and they go drip, 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 one at a time, right where the plants are growing, your tomatoes, your eggplants, your cucumbers, instead of spraying it all over the land, and especially doing it during the day when it's hot out and half that water evaporates before it ever gets to the plant. So those are some of the adaptations that we should all be taking on and using in our own lives, our own agriculture all around the world. It can be done. And whether the climate changes again, if it gets colder or it gets warmer, there's less or more CO2 in the air. Those are all things that really drive what happens with our plants, whether they're going to grow quickly or slowly, whether there's going to be enough plant life for the animals to live. So there are all kinds of things we should and could be doing, but most of the places we're not.
We are receiving comments from the audience, and this is, SRB, how are you doing? Could you explain with the Earth's past, the CO2 level was around 4,000 ppm, and what happened to eventually bring that down to today's level of 420 ppm?
Well, I suppose I should dive into that first.
Yes.
4,000 ppm, parts per million, means 10 times what we have today, but almost 20 times what there was in the air during those ice ages. So even in 1850 or 1800, the CO2 level in the air was only around 280 or 300, and it's come up for a wide variety of reasons. As the earth warms, more carbon dioxide comes out of the water in the oceans and elsewhere. The oceans are a major place where the carbon dioxide is held. You have more plants that absorb more carbon dioxide, but then they release more oxygen for us to breathe. So it's a big, important cycle. And exactly where and when that change went from 4,000 to 420 or 300 or 250, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not well enough versed in that aspect of carbon dioxide cycles to know exactly when, but back in those times when coal was being made on our planet, we had totally different conditions. The Devonian period, we had so much carbon dioxide in the air and it was much warmer. Plants were growing enormously fast and very big, and then they were decaying, making coal, the same coal that we are mining today, and finding fossilized plants right there in the coal beds. So it is a very real phenomenon, and it certainly wasn't due to cavemen planting, burning fires, or somebody driving around in their caveman cars back in those days. So again, natural climate change is real, and it can be profound. Some of it good, some of it bad, depending on what you need, what your perspectives are.
Yeah. Paul and Ronald, we mentioned conservation, efficiency, but what do you see in terms of technology that are available or can be available very, very soon to face these threats we are facing? Do you both see something coming in terms of technology and science that we can not control? Of course, it's too hard to control Earth, but
let me jump in and just suggest something for Ron to talk about. Do we face a threat? Where's the threat?
Well,
I mean, a degree or two warmer, a little more carbon dioxide.
We can survive with this 2 degrees, no problem.
Well, I'm in Southern California, and every day I experience a 30-degree change because the coastal fog comes in. It'll change 30 degrees by the time we get to mid-afternoon. Now, if it changed 30.2 degrees, I don't think the world would come to an end. I would just adjust. But, CO2 is interesting because our astronauts, I think, get exposed to 2,000 parts per million in their spaceship. People on the nuclear subs, it's in 1,000 ppm. And, CO2 in greenhouses is usually artificially inflated to like 1,200 to make the plants grow faster. And, with CO2 at 420, we wanted to get it lower. Well, if you get down to 170, life cannot exist. And so, you really don't want to go down as much as you really want to go up. And with 70% of the Earth being ocean, most of the CO2 is in the ocean, how are you going to control the CO2 coming out of the ocean? You can stop it? You can freeze it, make another ice age.
Yeah, very good. Let me back to Paul. So there is no threat. We are facing a normal world. CO2, methane are not something that we can be careful with that?
Let's look at these numbers. 440 parts per million. That means 0.0042% of the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Not even, not even 1/2 of 1%. It's just a tiny little squidgen of the atmosphere. The oxygen is 20% of the Earth's atmosphere. Methane is 0.00017%. So even less methane, such an infinitesimal amount that we shouldn't even be thinking about this as something that's going to be a driving force in climate change. It's a small part of climate change, and it's usually in response to climate change. First, you get the warming, then you get more CO2 coming out of the oceans and being absorbed by plants. But if we also look at the other aspects that they're talking about with climate change, hurricanes, tornadoes, more storms, worse storms. You look at the actual records, whether you're in Brazil or you're in Argentina or you're in the United States, there is no increase in tornadoes and hurricanes. We actually, here in the United States, where we have more tornadoes every year than the rest of the world put together, we have fewer major tornadoes than we had 50 years ago. So explain that. You look at the hurricane record, there's no up or down that's consistent. They come in, there's spurts where you have some years where there's more hurricanes, more violent hurricanes. Other times there are no hurricanes. We went in 1850s, so 140 years ago, 200 years ago almost, we had 9 years without one major hurricane hitting the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few years ago, from 2005 to 2015 to 2017, we had 12 years where not one major hurricane hit the United States. So we had more hurricane-free years where they were only low-level hurricanes in recent memory than any time in American history that we know about. Does that mean climate change is causing fewer hurricanes, fewer major hurricanes, more CO2 equals fewer hurricanes? I doubt it, but we can't deny the fact that we hit a record for few major category 3 to 5 hurricanes just a few years ago that we've never had before.
You know, to elaborate on a lot of the stuff Paul's talked about regarding climate changes and ice ages, you know, the Earth has been around for 4 billion years. And 99.999% of those climate changes occurred before we were here. And it's almost incomprehensible to think that our microsecond on this planet is going to change the climate.
Yeah, that's right. Ronald, let me provoke you. What can make human life expectancy go into 200 years? I mean, transition for renewables is the solution.
Well, transition to renewables would decrease the population.
Why?
Because it doesn't make any of the products. We populated from 1 to 8 billion in less than 200 years, not because of oil, because of the products we got from oil. We now have a medication. We have a hospital industry that didn't exist 200 years ago. We got 50,000 merchant ships. We're growing food in any part of the country. You can move that food to a different country with merchant ships and jets and everything else. And so we've got the ability right now to feed 8 billion people. And if you get rid of oil, wind and solar is not going to operate merchant ships. Wind and solar is not going to operate, the jets. The Air Force One's going to be grounded. Well, that'd be good. But no, we got the ability to basically feed these people, and we're basically going the other direction of eliminating if you get rid of oil, you get rid of all these products, and everything's going to be in short supply, and supply and demand. If the demand is increasing and supply is decreasing, the products we're using today, price is going to go up, 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 and it's just going to drive inflation, and it's a crazy cycle, reverse cycle.
And on top of that, Ron, the cost of electricity to cook your food and to heat and cool your home is going to be 3-4 times higher than it is today. Germany is already seeing that. They're paying far more than we're paying here in the United States for electricity, and people can't heat their homes properly in the wintertime. Britain has done studies that show thousands of people dying every winter who shouldn't have died, but they're dying because they can't heat their homes properly in the wintertime. So the cost of food will go up, the availability of food, as you said, the cost of heating, the cost of doing any business, people will lose their jobs. There are many factors that come in when you start going to wind and solar. Wind and solar provide electricity only 20 to 40% of a day, a month, a year. What do you do the rest of the time? You just don't have electricity? How do you live without electricity?
But
You're right. One thing about wind and solar, they don't work most of the time.
Yeah. And they
right.
need backup. They need contingencies like natural gas.
Now,
and things like
And
that.
all those things cost even more. Instead of just building a natural gas power plant, you have to build thousands of wind turbines and millions of solar panels and have that all connected to batteries that step in when the wind isn't blowing, the sun isn't shining. None of that just comes here for free. It costs billions and billions of dollars. And that's going to add to the price of your electricity, your heating, your everything you do, everything you buy is going to go up in price. People's incomes aren't going to go up. They're going to be starving in many different ways.
But I saw some numbers in Texas that wind and solar are becoming almost half of the energy supply in the state. Is it correct?
Well, there's a misnomer about that too.
Some days,
some
days,
hours, some minutes.
Because they talk about
the next time you look, they're 0% of the electricity.
Yeah, they talk about the nameplate rating of wind and solar. But since I don't work most of the time, the nameplate rating is meaningless. If you have a nameplate rating on coal or natural gas or hydro or nuclear, it's going to generate probably 95% of that 100% of the time because it's operating continuously and uninterruptibly. But a nameplate rating is fallacious on wind and solar because it doesn't work most of the time.
Yeah.
And if you're in the operating room, you don't want the lights to go out.
Yeah. But oil is much more complicated, Ronald, than energy. Because oil, we have 30% of oil is used for petrochemical products. The other part is used for logistics, heavy logistics, as you
transportation,
always said.
Cars, trucks, planes, the space program. Germany was the first country to go green. And as Paul mentioned, they've got the most expensive electricity in the world today. California is right behind them. We have, I think, almost the most expensive electricity in the country and the most expensive fuel. And Governor Newsom is proud of it. He wants to drive it up further. And so
and
I see
what happened to the jobs and the companies in Germany? They didn't just magically switch over to something else. They went out of business in Germany. They've moved so many of the chemical and automobile, steel, and other companies to China, to other places that are burning coal to get cheap electricity. And all the pollution has moved from Germany to China.
That's a good point.
You cannot have clean, green, renewable, sustainable wind and solar. You have to dig holes in the ground and mine 1,000 times more rock to provide all the metals and minerals, and all of that pollutes, and you can't process this stuff without pollution. You can't transport it without pollution. You just move where the pollution is coming from, but it's still going into the same water and atmosphere of the earth.
Yeah, but
Paul,
Paul and Ronald, who invented green agendas for wealthy countries, and who are they, and why they did these things?
all the politicians have picked up on the green movement.
That's why.
It could be because they refuse to participate in conversations.
And they want the power and the prestige and the money.
But
basically,
outsourcing the source of minerals to China, like lithium and cobalt. So
well,
what's the logic of these things?
I joke that in California, we're the most regulated state in the country. Our governor only breathes California air. Anything outside the borders, he doesn't breathe that. And as Paul mentioned, if you move manufacturing to a different country, they've got no environmental controls, they've got no labor controls. The emissions are greater over there, but he doesn't breathe that air, so it's okay. If it's clean here, he's okay. But you're right, we're increasing emissions, increasing cost. I think last year, California keeps reducing its oil production in the state as demand keeps going up. And last year alone, we imported so much oil that Governor Newsom spent $26 billion on foreign crude oil instead of having that money spent here for jobs and keep the emissions down.
It's totally crazy.
It's nuts.
How much of your electricity do you import in California?
I think it's around 30% or more. And that's going to increase because we have one nuclear power plant left, the Diablo Canyon, and Newsom.
Are they closing?
Wait. There's two answers to that question. Newsom, it was going to close in 25, and Newsom saw a lot of blackouts, so he extended it to 2030. Well, to keep it open for another 5 years is going to cost billions of dollars. And the California budget is so screwed up right now. To save that money, the state legislature said, no, we're going to basically close it in 25 and save those billions of dollars. So if it closes in 25, it provides 9% of the state's electricity. So it'd be more imported electricity. Yeah, we're a big importer. And whoever has the supply has control of California.
And what's happening in California and the United States and Germany is all these politicians are writing laws to shut down the generation of electricity from reliable sources like coal and gas. At the same time, they're writing laws to increase demand for electricity with electric vehicles, electric furnaces, electric stoves and ovens and water heaters. So the demand is going up higher and higher every year. The supply is going down every year.
And data centers.
At some point, things are going to start falling apart, and we're going to have blackouts, and people are going to die.
In the article,
and politicians are going to blame the oil companies.
In the article you both wrote, there is a statement from Stephen Liazzi. Wind and solar are short-term solutions only. Could you explain this point? Why short-term?
Yeah. Well, President Obama was telling Uganda and Africa that they should skip the oil and gas and just go directly to wind and solar. And there are all these outfits coming into Uganda, which is where Stephen was before he was tragically killed in a bus accident. These companies, these little organizations are coming in and trying to sell the people solar ovens to bake bread and solar ovens to warm up water. And replace the coal and cow dung that they're burning in open fires to cook and heat. And Stephen was making the point that, number one, these are short-term solutions. What we really need in Uganda, he said, was we need electricity that is as much as we need, reliable all the time, and it's got to be affordable for poor families, the average families. Wind and solar doesn't give us that. We need to be hooked up, he said, to the grid, to a big power plant and have jobs and so forth. And these companies that are selling us little solar ovens or a wind turbine to give us enough electricity maybe to have a light bulb in our hut and a charger for our phone and a 1 cubic foot refrigerator. They're lying to us and they're cheating us. And we have, this was his main point, we have a God-given right to have the same living standards people in the United States have. And we're being told we can't have that. He said that's just wrong. It's a human rights violation.
And Ronald, there is another statement in your article we stole. There are no silver bullet solutions to save people from natural or man-made climate change. Is it?
Well, that's true. Basically, what's an extra degree or even 2 degrees of warming in places like Africa? It's already incredibly hot there, and people are used to it. Africans, they worry about the need, and they need to fix their malnutrition, their starvation, the absence of electricity, as Paul
Basic
talked
things.
about. Yeah, and the killer diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, HIV, AIDS. We just need to set them free. Eradicating the world of crude oil usage without having a replacement in mind, it would be immoral and evil. There's extreme shortages of those products that are now manufactured from oil. It would result in billions of fatalities, from diseases, malnutrition, weather-related deaths, and could be a much greater threat than any climate change to the world's 8 billion.
Yeah, and you know what? This is part of their goal in many respects. They want us to get rid of the fuels that we have, the products we have, the living standards we have, the kinds of houses we have. They want to get rid of the people that want these things. Jacques Cousteau, 30 years ago, was saying in an interview with a French magazine, he says, it's terrible to say this, but it's true. We have to find a way to get rid of 350,000 people per day. He wanted to get the Earth's population back to 1 billion people or less.
Wow.
And this is what a lot of the environmentalists are saying today. Even Obama's climate and energy science advisor, forgetting his name at the moment, but he was saying we have to de-develop the United States and then tell the rest of the world how much development we will allow them to have.
Oh, very strong, this phrase. Oh, my God. So is it under control of the United States, all the world?
John Holdren is his name. He was the advisor to President Obama on all these science matters. Just imagine having somebody like that with those attitudes in charge of the world. And this is what we've got.
If you want to get back to 1 billion people, you go back to the 1800s where we had 1 billion. We had a zero emission society. There was no electric power plants. There was no transportation. There was no hospitals. People didn't live past 40 years of age. I mean, that was a zero emission society.
And how Elon Musk will become richer, with more money, because 1 billion people only.
Yeah, we got richer and more healthy, lived longer, had better lives because of Colonel Drake in 1847 drilling a hole in the ground and being the first person on Earth to actually bring oil out of the earth. And then people started discovering uses for this. And the more uses we had, the more valuable it became. I tell John Holdren, Jacques Cousteau, President Obama, Al Gore, if you believe we should get rid of all these people on Earth, here are some cyanide tablets. You show us how to do it.
My God.
Do it, lead by example. Don't tell the rest of us we need to die.
So, Ronald and Paul, for the conclusion, we are almost in 40 minutes. Our target's 40. So there is no salvation to us as humans. Is it correct?
No, there is salvation. And I think it starts with conversations.
Thank you.
In my articles, I think in Paul's articles, I'm trying to stimulate those conversations among teachers, students, parents, at the family dinner table,
Yeah.
because talk about it, because, just jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, that's not the solution. And that's what they're proposing.
That's a good one.
Yeah, you're right. And Armando, you're doing your part in this conversation. People are going to listen to what we are saying here, and they're going to think a little bit more. This is one of the reasons so many of these climate focused people like Al Gore don't want us to have an ability to have this conversation or to talk to other people. They want to censor us and silence us, and we're not going to let that happen.
Yeah, interesting. Very good. Oh, thank you so much. This last words for me, we have salvation. Paul Dreesen
Thank you.
and Ronald Stein. Was a great pleasure to have you both here today. It was a pleasure.
Gentlemen, been a pleasure.
Thank you so much,
Have a
Armando.
great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.